Right, welcome. I'm David. This is Warriors of Light Astro Tarot, but I'm not going to talk about astrology and tarot. I want to talk about magic mushrooms, my own experience with psilocybin mushrooms, with growing them and with healing. It was way back in 2007, 2008, into 2009. So I'm not really going to talk about growing. This is chapter 1, we're going to call it. I'm writing a book about this too, because it was called To Do That, and it's slow and coming. And I will talk a little bit about growing, but you know, it's not like I think there's plenty of guidance for growing. So this is really about my own experiences with healing, and something I've been wanting to talk about for a long time. And I probably will manage to throw in some astrology somewhere, as I probably can't help it. What I want to do is go back to 2006, and I'll kind of go through this kind of quick, but in 2006 I committed myself to a mental institution for suicidal ideation. And at the time I had a very good job as in management, made good money, had a lot of sick leave, and I went to a therapist, and I hadn't gone for a while for depression, and was pretty suicidal. And the therapist said, you know, kind of an intake, and she was like, well, you know, this and that, if you've ever done this, or asking questions, was just for talk therapy. And she said, well, do you ever have suicidal ideations? I'm like, yeah. Well, how often do you have them? She wrote it down. Every day. She's like, oh, you do every day? Okay, well, can you describe them? Do you say they're elaborate when you think about them? I'm like, oh, yeah, you're pretty elaborate. And she's like, well, really? And she puts down her pen now. Well, can you kind of give me an idea? And I said, yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. We lived like about 3 blocks from Arlington Fairfax Hospital. It's a very big hospital there, just outside the Beltway in Washington, D.C. area. And I said, you know, I've actually drove over there, and I could see the little bench, you know, next to the emergency room where I would do it. You know, and I have a 357 Magnum, my wife does, keeps it in her drawer. And I said, I take that out often, maybe almost every day, and I'll kind of look at it. And the way I use it is, I think, well, I'm going to try to make it one more day, and if it gets too bad and I just can't take it anymore, I can end it. So I would go over to this bench that I know where it's at, and I've actually gone so far as walking over there and kind of sitting on that bench, and she's listening now with intent. And I said, well, you know, then I would take out my donor card and lay it on the bench next to me with my driver's license. And then I've already at this point taken a large amount of aspirins in this suicidal ideation fantasy, and waited, you know, about 40 minutes. And then, you know, I would take the 357 Magnum and put it in the roof of my mouth and pull the trigger. And I would call them first, the hospital, and say, hello, I'm outside, and I'm going to blow my head off, and I'd like you to try to harvest my organs if you can. And at this point, like, she's just, her mouth is open, and she's like, are you kidding me? And I said, no. And she's like, that's the most elaborate suicidal fantasy and the most concrete one that I've ever heard in my life, David. I've been doing this for 30 years. I'm kind of proud. I'm like, I always consider myself a writer. And I'm like, well, thank you. And she goes, no, this is horrible. She said, my God, David. She said, you were so close to committing suicide. It's frightening. And I said, yeah, I know, that's why I'm here. You know, I figure it's only a matter of time, you know, before I check out, because, you know, and I can't seem to get a handle on it. And then she kind of freaked out, and she said, you can't leave this room without going to commit yourself. And I kind of laughed, no, I'm not going to do that. And then, you know, I heard a little voice in my head, and it kind of said, wait, think about Hunter S. Thompson. What would he do? And I thought to myself, you know, maybe this will be a good experience for me to commit myself to a mental institute for the experience. And then a little part of me said, well, you know, I haven't tried, you know, the antidepressants for a while. Maybe there's a new one that could possibly be helpful. And so maybe I'll listen. And so I listened to her, and she talked me into it. And I'll leave that for chapter 2. Because when I start the book, I go right into my what I call breakthrough experience, which was a little more than a year later, which was on maybe a year and a half later, something like that, which was in 2007, February 25th, a day that I remember well, I have the astrology chart for it as an astrologer called the event chart. I know it was right about, I give it about a 10:30 time frame, which was when I actually came out of the experience and became conscious again. But you know, when I think about where to start the book, that's kind of where it starts, because I ended up going home on that day that I committed myself, because I refused to just go there, and I said I want to get some things, some books and a writing pad. And one of the books I got was The Cosmic Serpent, you know, by Jeremy Narby. And I recommend this book. It's an amazing book. He's an amazing guy, an anthropologist who lived in the Peruvian jungle, I believe it was, for a year or more, and worked with the indigenous people there on creating some rights for their knowledge of plant substances, which was being used by pharmaceutical companies and giving them nothing. And they, of course, would make the pharmaceuticals out of them so they could patent and make money. So he was kind of working from that angle. But kind of as a secondary thing, he began to get an interest in the ayahuasca that they were using. And he kept asking him, you know, how did you know to combine two different substances, two different plants? Because one of them is an MAO inhibitor, the Banistrapi root, they call it. And it's kind of shaped like a DNA coil. So, and this is the one that has an MAO inhibitor in it. And what that does is it blocks the digestive juices that would otherwise destroy the other ingredient, which is a leaf. They use several different things, but there's mostly these leaves from different bushes and trees that have DMT, right? Very powerful hallucinogen. So ayahuasca is created, which is called the mother of hallucinogens. Many people now do ayahuasca tourism that go down and have claimed to get great benefit. I did try ayahuasca many times. You can actually buy the ingredients online. Basement Shaman, one that comes to mind, I remember. And I remember getting it and following the instructions. And the first time I did it, I went backpacking by myself deep into the mountains. And then in the evening, you know, I brewed up the brew. And I took it the next morning when I was alone there, and had about half a quart, and I cooked it down for hours the night before, and absolutely nothing happened. I got a little nauseous, and that was kind of my experience with it. But the book really opened my mind and got me to thinking. And I went through this experience. I was only in the mental institute for 3 days, and that's a whole story in itself. And I began this use of the different kinds of drugs, the pharmaceuticals. So I'm quite familiar with the pharmaceuticals they use for depression. And, you know, I came to the conclusion like a year later that I'm going to die, and medical science is failing me because none of this is helping. There was also a lot of therapy involved. You know, I've been in therapy all my life. I started when I was 17. I went to a therapist on my own, and started therapy because, you know, I knew, and I think the therapy helped me. If it wasn't for the therapy, I'd definitely be dead. Not probably, I'd be dead. I would have killed myself. So it's not like it didn't help. It just didn't completely help. And so I kind of was going to the conclusion that I'm going to have to save myself here. And I began to read many books. Back then, you read books still in 2007. There was Borders Bookstore, and I worked very hard, long hours. But every weekend, pretty much find me at Borders Bookstore. Went there instead of the library. I made good money, and I kind of like to buy a book, and you know, I buy a book a week. And often it was becoming more and more along these lines. And I came across Food of the Gods, you know, by Terence McKenna. And I credit Terence McKenna with saving my life from the grave, because he was already dead from brain cancer by the time I read it. And at that time, I wasn't so much on the internet. I don't know if I'd even seen him on the internet. So I read all of his books after that one. But I'd highly recommend Food of the Gods. The other books are, you know, if you're really into it, yeah. But the Food of the Gods is an amazing work, you know. And that one really got me thinking. And so I tried the ayahuasca. That didn't help. I bought cactus that has mescaline in it, you know. The Peruvian, what's it called? Flaming torch, cactus, and some others. And actually bought the actual physical cactus and had them shipped to my house. And I followed the instructions on how to make from them. potion that you drink that's supposed to maximize the mescaline and not destroy it. And I gotta say, I didn't really have any success with that. They ended up with this concoction that it was the consistency of cum, and you had to drink a pretty good amount of it. And I remember standing over the sink, and I was pretty hardcore and committed to this, and I would take a big gulp of it, and I've never swallowed cum. If I were gay, I think I would, because I believe any job worth doing is worth doing right. But you know, I never had, and it was just so gross, and I was gagging and throwing up. And so I had a big glass. If I could get half of this down, I think it'll work. And I kept standing over and throwing up and taking it and throwing up until I finally was able to keep down what I thought was about half of it. And I tried this several times in several different ways, and I got, high off of it, but I wasn't out to get high. I was out to heal my mind, and I was looking through for what Terence described as the heroic dose experience, where you have the ego death. I tried also baby Hawaiian wood rose seeds, and they work. It's difficult to find the ones that aren't coated in deadly chemicals, herbicides that are used, but I finally did. And they definitely, I had taken LSD when I was younger quite a bit. It was a phase when I was in my 20s, early 20s. And they are really related. It's a tryptamine hallucinogen, like the mushrooms, but I think the ones that are in the baby Hawaiian wood rose and the morning glory seeds is very much closely related to the LSD. Shout out to Albert Hoffman, one of the greatest men to ever live, who created LSD. But it didn't really do what I wanted either. I felt the experience coming on. It was very much like the LSD experience, where you feel it coming on, and it would kind of peak, and I got some colors, and it didn't really do it either. I don't know what else I tried. Those were the main things: ayahuasca, mescaline, and I was trying to get things like, I was living in the suburbs of Washington D.C., holding down a job. I was living in a neighborhood that's full of doctors and lawyers, and I told no one about what I was doing, and I was doing this completely on my own. I really didn't even talk to my wife about it. We didn't have a very good relationship, and she kind of didn't want to hear about it. And basically, she at one point said, I want you to have your own bathroom. And we had 2 bathrooms. So I said, fine. So I took kind of over this one bathroom, and it was big enough where I could grow some things in there. And so I got it in my mind to buy the spores from earthstongue.com. I think they're still operational. I'm not really sure. It's been some years. And I'm not even really clear on what the laws are anymore. I did talk to a lawyer afterwards, and he said, you can talk about things that happened in the past, just don't talk about things that you're going to do in the future. Don't say publicly, hey, I'm going to take this illegal drug on Saturday, next Saturday. Don't do that. But you're fine talking about in the past. So I'm talking about it, and so I kind of got it in my head to try it. So I got some spores from Earth's Tongue, and I am typically Sagittarius and don't really tend to be thorough. I have a Mercury in Sagittarius, which is a ridiculous Mercury. I say Mercury in Sagittarius like a newborn giraffe. It's just ridiculous. And so it tends to skip a lot of details and take things with a broad stroke. Mercury is your mind, and how you think and how you speak. I did buy them. I did basically read the instructions. I bought a kit to grow them in, and I began to do it, and had some success and mostly failures. And after about 3 tries, I realized, okay, David, you're going to have to actually read a book. And I love reading, and would read voraciously, but I hate reading like detailed stuff like instructions and stuff. It's like, no. But I learned. I really felt like I had a little bit of experience. I got enough to get a little bit of an experience, and I began to feel like maybe this is what will help me. And at that time, I was seeing a psychiatrist and a therapist and taking these drugs. And I didn't tell any of them about what I was doing. So reading the book really helped, because I realized, about having sterile culture and everything. And I began to have some success. So I tried to approach this rather scientifically. So what I did at first was I would work all week, and most weekends I would have off. And on the weekends that I would have off, I would do all of my business, and I usually ate pretty good. So I cook a bunch of brown rice and some stuff for the week, and freeze it on Saturdays. Do my shopping on Saturdays. Do laundry on Saturdays, and then on Sundays I like to do it in the morning. I know it's different from a lot of people, but my only advice in taking mushrooms, well, set and setting, and dosage, but I like just to be quiet, and I think it needs to be on an empty stomach. That's the big thing. I really am not a big fan of throwing up, and I've had some nausea, especially with these large doses, but I found it to be pretty minimal as long as it was on an empty stomach. And so I don't know if you can see me, even that wasn't as big as I am now. After be like maybe chapter 3, it'd be what happened the next year after this catastrophic attack that almost killed me, which I don't think was related to the mushrooms. So I didn't like fasting all day and then doing it at night, and it worked fine for me in the morning. And so all my experiences after that were pretty much in the morning. And the first time I did it, my wife had gone out to do something that morning, and I had made some coffee, drank some coffee, and I did 3 grams of dried mushrooms at a scale. Always recommend a scale. And these were mushrooms that I dried myself and grown myself. And so I always recommend this too. When you grow the mushrooms, I don't want to talk about growing, but in my opinion, for me, when I grew the mushrooms, there was this relationship with them that I think was a dynamic part, because it worked. Spoiler alert, ultimately. And I almost think, like, if I just went and bought them on the street from someone, I don't know if it'd have been the same, So I think that growing them was an integral part of the whole healing experience, which I do describe as shamanic, but I only in the sense that I was using them to heal. I'm a white person. I grew up in the suburbs, and I've always been kind of a hippie. I'm extremely open-minded, but I just wasn't comfortable with feathers and dancing around and pretending. To me, it was like pretending to be something I wasn't. So I went into it with healing intent, writing down, asking for healing. I always surround myself in the pure white light of Christ, is the way I do it. I'm not really religious, but my mother taught me. So you think of Jesus representing the Christ, this pure energy, right? And so there was that beforehand. And so I took the 3 grams on an empty stomach, had some coffee in the morning, and I went around the house just beforehand. I think this was in about November, and in the Washington, D.C. area, it was a particularly nice day. So I went around the house and opened all the windows and the doors that had screens. And we had 3 dogs. And then I went and sat down in a chair, like a lazy boy chair in the living room, in quiet there, and just closed my eyes and began to relax in the lazy boy chair. And after about 35 or 40 minutes, I estimate, when looking at a watch, that's typically when they kick in, when you eat them on an empty stomach. And I just would eat them, not to make a potion. I have in other experiences, but initially I would just eat the dried mushrooms. And sometimes I ate fresh mushrooms, but these were all dried and weighed. And after about 35 or 40 minutes, I began to feel it coming on. It's like going up a roller coaster, and you feel like it's getting near the top and you're about to go. It's a little bit similar to acid trip 2, when you feel you're about to go over the top and start your experience. And excuse me, I'm in Mexico, and it's really, I call this the concrete jungle, so it's beautiful, but I don't know what they're doing out there, so you might get a little noise. But as it started to peak, I heard a voice, and it was a external auditory hallucination. This is when you hear a voice as if it's someone speaking that's maybe sitting next to you. And the voice said, you inhabit your body the way your body inhabits this house. And that came to me just as I felt like I was starting to go. It was like, whoa, I'm really starting to trip now. And I was thinking to myself, wow, this is working, this is working. And I had such a good feeling from that, from it working, and a little bit scary feeling. And at the same time, as I heard this, you inhabit your body the way your body inhabits this house. And as I heard it at the same time, like I saw a rerun of myself walking through the house, opening the windows as if it was taken like from a security camera in my mind. And I was watching in my mind me going through the house a few minutes earlier and opening up all the windows. And it was, and then it was over. And then I came down, and I remember just kind of opening my eyes. All the dogs are laying around me quiet, a couple on the couch, and thinking, wow, that worked. And I kind of got what they were saying. For a while, you know, I kind of, at that point, actually I was kind of an atheist at this point in my life. But I only would say that I'm an atheist because I didn't want to talk about it. And what I believed was so like unique from what seemingly everyone else believed. I just didn't even want to talk about it with anyone, you know, because I don't know, I just didn't seem to be something I wanted to talk about. And because everybody kind of had their own ideas on all of this, and none of them matched up with mine, and I didn't have any desire or need to debate people about any of this. And it's just like, so mostly when people would ask me, well, I'm an atheist, you know. But I got it that, you know, the thing we are is a spiritual thing, and we inhabit this body. I now call it, this is my DNA body machine that, you know, is given to me for this life to, so my soul can experience this life, you know. So that really hit me. So work, and the next week, and Saturday take care of business, and Sunday comes, and I tell my wife, you know, I want to do these mushrooms again and be alone. She's like, great, I'm going to go out and do something. So she leaves again. And so I kind of do the same thing. And I am sitting in the chair, and kind of now I'm keeping track, writing it all down. And so from 3 grams, I went to 3.2 grams. It just, in my mind, seemed like the thing to do. I didn't want to rush to the 5 grams right away. It seemed like I wanted to titrate up. And I felt like I was being responsible and scientific, and not just rushing headlong as a typical Sagittarian energy I have. So, and because I was taking this like really seriously. I felt like my life depended on this, honestly. It did, honestly. My life did depend on this. If this had not succeeded, I would be dead. I would have killed myself by now. There's no doubt in my mind. I was a heartbeat away, and I don't think anything else would have helped. So the second time, I'm trying to think now, what did the voice say the second time? The third time was you haven't crossed over yet. And the second time, I'm trying to think now, I suddenly had a brain lock on what it said. Well, it's the same kind of experience where I'm going up, and it's starting to peak out, and I'm thinking like, oh my God, this is working, here it comes. And the voices said, you are God, and that was it. That was what it was. And it kind of brought God into it at that point, and that kind of shocked me. And again, as soon as I heard that, it sort of ended, and I was kind of looking around and thinking like, what does that mean? That one kind of got me, but it really encouraged me too, and it kind of told me 2 things. One, that I felt like this was definitely the right path, that this was the way to go. and 2, that I needed to increase my dosage. So the following week, again, back to work and keeping this all to myself. And Sunday morning comes, and my wife maybe kind of knew by now, so she went off to do something, left me alone. So now I increased it to 3.6 grams. I don't know where I got that from, but it seemed to me the thing to do at the time. And so I went through the same routine, and I'm sitting in the chair with my dogs around me quietly. I like to have peace and quiet. And I have my eyes closed. I'm relaxing in the same kind of thing. I feel it coming on. It does feel a little heavier now, a little stronger. And I feel it coming to peak out. And again, I'm thinking like, wow, maybe this is going to work. I feel like this is going to work. And this time, again, every time it's an auditory hallucination, as if someone's speaking from outside me. And this time, the voices say simply, "You have not crossed over yet." That's all it said. It's right there, and I feel like I'm getting ready to go and just trip balls, and all it says, "You have not crossed over yet." And it ended, and I was just like, boom, just down. And like almost each time, I should say, it was almost like it would start to come on, start to peak, and this would end like stone cold sober. Like I didn't even feel like I was really high or anything from it afterwards. And that one really got me, because when I heard "you haven't crossed over yet," I smiled. I remember just such a big smile, and I felt so much hope. And I felt like, so you can cross over. That was my thought. And I said, I'm going to cross over. Now, what happened was I had some mushrooms at that point that I had dried them, I believe, not well. And so I said to myself, I didn't think that they would have the potency. And the next week that followed, I was bound and determined to cross over, because now I thought, I need to do the heroic dose. Now I get it. And if another piece of advice I would say to anyone, do the heroic dose. If this is what you want, if you want healing, if you want to talk to God, if you really just do the heroic dose. I found that when you do the lower dosages, you get into trouble, because the ego fights. It's not enough to take you out, and then the ego fights, and because you get scared, and oftentimes that's where you get the bad trips. Just my opinion, something I noticed. So whereas when you take the heroic dose, it just, your ego dies, and it's scary as fuck. I'll get into that in a minute, I think, today. But it's over quick, and there's not a lot of tussling with it. Now I remember taking 3 grams one time years later when I was in Mexico, because I thought my wife was going to take it, and I wanted to just kind of test. It was only 2.5 grams, I think it was. I just kind of want to test how strong this was, because when I gave it to her, I kind of wanted it to be right. And holy shit, did I have an amazing trip. But it was like skittering on the edge of a bad trip the whole time. It was like driving down a mountainside with the brakes out, just barely keeping control, and the car careening everywhere. And so that's why I say about the large dose. So the following week, again, the same routine. This time was a really nice weekend. And I remember I set out in the backyard. We had a nice hot tub. We had this beautiful backyard, 1/4-acre lot there, which is large for the city. And it was very quiet and private, and a beautiful day. And I prepared everything well. I remember I had drainage hoses going out from the where the rain gutters were. And I remember moving them out from my sight, because I thought, oh, if I'm tripping, maybe I'll think those are a big black snake. So again, setting, I thought it through with the setting, and I felt like my set was in a pretty good place. And again, it was kind of early morning, empty stomach, and I sat down with a cup of coffee, and I had 10 grams, and I weighed it out. And I remember my best friend at the time, he happened to come by a minute after I ate the 10 grams. And I remember I ate the 10 grams. It was a bit of a chore. It was a bit of a chore, eating the 10 grams. And he's the only one I told anything. It's the only one I told anything about this to. And the advice is don't tell anyone, but I did tell him, and he was my best friend for a long time. I trusted him. And And he came around and he said, you know, what are you doing? And he said, well, I just ate 10 grams. He's like, you ate 10 grams? He's like, are you crazy? And I said, no, I gotta cross over, dude. This is like, and he's like, okay, you know, we kind of chatted a few minutes, and I said, if you don't mind, you know, Roger, I'd kind of like to be alone. And, you know, he's like, I get it, you know, and he said, you know, Godspeed, dude. He's like, you're fucking crazy, but okay, you know. He's like, well, if you want to cross over, I'm thinking 10 grams, you should blast off, you know. And I said, well, you know, hoping so. And so, you know, I sat there, and time went by, and then an hour went by. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. Zippy. And at that point, due to my catastrophic failures in growing previously, from not paying attention to details, I really didn't have a good stash of mushrooms. And I think by now it was kind of like early December. There and starting to get cold. And so I was chagrined. But I was that when they said you cannot cross over yet, I can't tell you how much hope that gave me, and this burning desire to cross over, you know, came in me. And so I went back to growing with more diligence. At that point, I had crops in the oven, so to speak, you know, and so I more than ever just tried really hard to make sure everything worked, and it was clean. Of course, I'm growing them in my bathroom, so that's like already like a no-no, but I didn't really have anywhere else. But I was going to great lengths to make sure that they were sterile. So push comes to shove, you know, with Christmas around and then New Year's. It really wasn't until February 25th of 2007 that I finally got back to where I had mushrooms. These were from a strain called Creepers. I don't know if they still sell them. The strains are funny with mushrooms. They're not like pot strains. It's kind of like dubious, maybe. I'm not really sure how big a difference the different strains are, really. When it comes to cubensis, I mean, it seems like there are some differences, but they might be somewhat, I'll say, irrelevant. But, you know, they're not profound, the differences. It's not like if you take a really good sativa pot and compare it against a really strong indica, you're going to be a profound difference in your experience, you know. But I don't think it's quite that way. But nevertheless, the Creepers was what I had, and they grew really well, and I dried them really carefully, and I found the best ways to use no heat. I just created like screens like from the windows, and I would hang them with strings and just put fans on them and fan dry them however long it took. Usually I just hang them in the spare bedroom and put a couple fans on them rotating around. And actually same way when I was also growing pot then. But you know, I find that a good way to grow pot, to dry your pot too. Because one of the big things about pods is you really don't want the heat. When you're growing it, you don't want a lot of heat. You know, they really like about 78 degrees, and the one thing you can do to get better pod is keep that heat down, which is hard to do when you're growing in small chambers or closets with light. So that's a whole nother scene. Pot I would kind of talk about growing, but on the other hand, there's so much on growing now. I used to think I was special because I knew how to grow a hydroponic pot, but shit, now everybody does it. It's not hard at all. And especially the equipment they have now is so much better than what we had, you know, back in the day to work with as an indoor grower. Kind of almost a crude kind of operation compared to what you have now. So now when the 25th came around, I felt like I really had a good product. I felt very confident in it, and I measured it out to exactly 5 grams. I think it was 5.2 grams of what I was going to use. And my wife was home. It was kind of cold. In fact, it was snowing. And I said, if you don't mind, I'm going to be in the bedroom when I do this. And I'd like to just be alone. She's like, fine. She's back where I would normally had been sitting to do my mushrooms, where the TV was. And she's watching the TV on Sunday morning, whatever. And so I go into the bedroom, and I'm reading a book on entheogens that I'd gotten. What the heck was it, this tomb? But anyway, so I developed like this process where I ate the 5 grams, And then after I eat them, I would try to do like a walk away, where I try to force myself to forget as much as I can that I didn't eat them. And the way that I would do that is I would just start reading something that I was really interested in. So I was actually reading about ayahuasca in this book. And then after about 30 minutes, I was sitting up in bed reading this, I began to feel kind of nauseous. And I remember kind of laying down and on my side and curling up in the fetal position. And I was laying on my side, and outside the window was this beautiful snowfall. And we had this green bush there. It had the green leaves that stayed green all winter. And the snow was piling up on the leaves, maybe yay deep. And it was falling, big white flakes, you know, this perfect February snow. And I remember just watching that snow fall and feeling kind of nauseous, you know, and just sort of laying there and surrounding myself in the white light. That was kind of my only protection. And man, I was feeling it come on this time. It's like I knew it was coming on. And then it got suddenly really scary, and my heart felt like my heart was just pounding. And I just imagined that there was this elephant coming, and I could just feel like the ground was with this giant elephant like approaching. And there was a part of my mind where I wanted to cry out for my wife who was in the living room and say, help me, help me. And another part of my mind kicked in, said, God damn it, David, you've been wanting this. Get a grip, you know. And so I didn't cry out, but I tell you, honestly, I was scared shitless, man. And then all I can say, it felt like this elephant sat on my chest, and I felt like I couldn't breathe, and I felt like I was dying. And I feel like I died, you know. It felt like dying. When they say ego death, apparently, I ain't kidding around. And it was absolutely terrifying. It was like death, and I was absolutely terrified. But it ended fairly quickly. And I got my breath back, and I remember laying there as it ended, and I was watching again the snow outside, and it was so crystal clear, and I just felt so peaceful and so beautiful and detached. And then I passed out or went to sleep. But what happened to me, it's so hard to describe. I remember years ago describing this on some different forums, and people even accused me of lying because it's not how it works, but it was how it worked. But I believe that I was unconscious, laying on my side in the fetal position. But I immediately felt as if that I was up in the corner of the bedroom, and I was in my spirit soul. I felt it was my soul. And I was looking down at my body, just like all of the stuff you hear about people in the hospital looking down at their body being worked on, feeling detached. And how I'd know that I was out on the bed, I looked at myself and I thought, fuck, he's asleep, or I'm asleep. And then I thought, wait a minute, I'm here, but I'm looking at myself there. And I was like, and when that happened, it was like that, and I shot off in the physical direction of my workplace. Okay, I had a very bad relationship with work, and I felt like I was in my soul body at this point. And I remember I was at work and in my soul body, and it was like my work often was. It was horrible, high pressure. It was stupid because it was horrible things happening all the time that didn't need to happen, because it felt like no one would listen and help make things better. And I was the one usually had to deal with the problems. So the problems were coming, and I was stressed out, and I felt like it was just hell. And I remember in this experience thinking to myself, God, what are you doing? What is this? How is this supposed to help me? And, you know, I mean, I thought this was supposed to heal me. And I was looking around, and I knew that I was in my soul body, and I knew the other people around me didn't know that. And of course, this Sunday morning, there's actually nobody at work. And I began to really think about it. Like, what am I supposed to be learning from this? You know, and I remember looking at my hands. It's like a, you know, what do you call it? One of those dreams where you're aware that you're dreaming. And I was aware that I was in this experience, and I was looking around and detaching myself. And I remember trying to go to the door to just leave, and the door wouldn't open. And I remember in the experience panicking and thinking, oh my God, I'm trapped here. And I thought, like, I'm in hell, this is hell. And, I was like, God, I hate it here, I got to get out of here. And then suddenly I found myself back in my room, and I opened my eyes in real life, and I looked again outside at the snow falling, and I didn't know what time it was. I purposely faced away from the clock, and I thought that the experience was over, and I seemed like the snow had accumulated another ½ inch, so I knew I had been out for some period of time. And I remember, like, I didn't move. I only moved my eyes, but I just lay there perfectly still. But I was thinking, wow, that really worked. That was incredible. Oh my God. And I remember thinking, wow, what is I supposed to learn about that? I already know that work sucks. That's not what I meant to do. But, and as I was thinking that, I felt like this swirling. This became a theme in other trips where you do 5 grams. I felt like this clockwise swirling like this. I was laying on my side, and like here, going straight up into the air, like straight up at 90 degrees. And as I felt that, I felt whoosh, my soul just shoot straight up this time. It wasn't up in the corner of the room looking down going, oh, look at it. It was just, and I felt like Superman when he goes, I just felt straight up. And I remembered the earth below. I kind of looked down. I was like, holy shit, it got tiny like that. Within an instant, all of a sudden, it was just, you couldn't even tell it was there. And I was going, and then at some point, I felt like a tug like this. And I knew that that was the golden cord, that's supposed to connect the astral body to the physical body. And when that happened, it's so hard to put into words, but as soon as that happened, I realized that we have a soul, and this is what people see when they see auras, and we have this is what people see when they see ghosts. These are what ghosts are. It's our soul. And I believe it gets very complex. I don't think our soul is this one thing, or that we're one thing. I think we're many things, that this soul is one aspect of us, like the body is one aspect of us. And I think that the soul is attached to the body. Like if you wave your hand physically, the soul is waving with it. And but I think the soul also can detach and move around when you have you want to move around with your astral body. But what I got from this experience kind of shocked me, because I realized that within the experience, and I realized I just left my soul, and it was so fat. But I remember thinking, if I left my body and I left my soul, then what is here? And I believe what was there was the true self, what they talk about, in Zen, the true face before you were born. So this is more than the soul, it's the eternal self. And this is the part of ourselves that is the same, from life to life to life, and it's not exactly David. That's kind of the key. What we are is not this body, and it's not this ego, and it's not this experience. This experience is part of what we are. And I call it, because as I later was trying to put it all together, I said, well, this is the greater reality within which this smaller reality exists, But I went on into, I could just say it seemed like realms of space, and I began to, it seemed like whatever I was began to just spread apart. And I remember feeling that I was so spread out that I kind of wasn't a cohesive thing anymore, but somehow I was still there. I was still having thoughts, and I was very aware of the experience. I was very aware that my body was back there in the bed, and that I was tripping, and I was having this experience. And it seemed to go on. I got to tell you, I think this is another thing where the mushrooms are so helpful. You experience things in these mushrooms experience, at least when you go to the heroic dose, my belief, as it's it's as real as reality. So you don't really learn from reading books or other people talking to you. You learn, I think, Sagittarius, from our actual experiences. This is why people don't take advice. If people took advice, there would be no problems in the world. Every problem is solved with good advice, just we don't listen. Well, why don't we listen? Because we need to experience the bad things. Sometimes you need to just stand aside and let the person fall into the pothole, because they need to fall into the pothole. It's part of their journey. This is high wisdom, high spiritual wisdom. It's hard to do, especially when you love someone, to just stand there and go, oh, fuck, he's going to go in the pothole. I'm not going to say anything. He needs to go in the pothole because that's his journey. And really, I'm just going to stay out of it, So in this experience, I remember one of my big theme is abandonment for my whole childhood. We won't go into it, but it's abandonment. The dirge of my life, the bane of my existence has been this abandonment issue, which I've been dealing with my whole life. So, and the mushrooms abandoned me. I laugh. They abandoned me in space, like there was no stars. It became just blackness, like there was faintly. I just felt like I was in some nether region of space that was away from everything. And it seemed to go on for 1 billion years. And what I'm trying to say before, it actually was like being abandoned for 1 billion years. And in this life, you can't really be abandoned for 1 billion years. And it went on, and I had many thoughts, and it's too much to describe. But I remember, and I have a huge problem with anger, don't express anger well. Lately, I've been getting it out, thank God it's coming. I'm one of those people that needs to be angry. It's kind of good for me, But I remember getting so goddamn angry, and I was like, you motherfuckers abandoned me in space? You know that I have issues with abandon. Why are you doing this to me? And I was like, at the mushrooms, I was just like, you motherfuckers, and I was so angry. And then suddenly there became like a secondary experience, and all of a sudden I was on this world, and I remember very distinctly that I was like a human spirit, and that I was with these other beings, that I was a part of these other beings, but none of them were human. Again, I felt like this soul, the spirit that we have, that is beyond the soul, beyond the body, it's not associated with anything that we would comprehend. It's a completely separate thing. And so now I'm in that part of myself, and I'm in this warrior self part of it. And so these other beings were just other beings like me, but none of them had come from any kind of experience in our reality or our universe or our world, but yet we were together. And this gets pretty weird, but we were storming heaven, and I basically was asking him, I said, what are we doing? I was obviously, I think I come from a history of warriors, not in this life, but it's just a strong theme with me. I think I've seen a lot of war in past lives. I've been a warrior many times over. And so that, I kind of didn't realize it then, but since then, working with different psychics and stuff and learning astrology in my chart, I see it, and very clearly. And they're saying, we're going to kill God. This is it. It's on. And I'm like, right on. I immediately understood, So this was, this was the God that we kind of created in our minds. It's like, I've often said, God didn't create us, we created God. Because the God that, when we say God and conceive of a God, we negate God. I don't know how to put other than that. And it's, the sacrilege is to just kind of conceive of God. Like to give God some kind of conception is to deny God. And so what we were doing, it was just clear to me, was we were going to destroy this false God. I felt like maybe in other realms it would have some benefit, but I felt clearly in the realm of earth that maybe it would help to bring people up to a higher level. And one of the things about mushrooms that's so incredible is you get to experience God directly, right? It's not talking, it's not words, it's not in a book, it's not some guy in a uniform preaching to you. It's no intermediary saying, let me connect you with God. Hold on a minute, we're going to connect you with God, pay your homage or, pray. No, this is actually experiencing God. So we went into this battle, and I remember, I'm kind of a pussy, honestly, but myself in this experience had no fear. No fear, see? Thank you. No fear. And everything then happened so fast, and God appeared. And I'm just going to tell you, God kicked our fucking ass, man. Within seconds, I remember having a sword and fighting, and within seconds, everyone around me was decimated. Not everyone, but maybe 5% of us were left standing. And there were beings, they seemed to kind of have bodies, and people were crying out, and some were dead, some were still alive, some were missing parts of their. It was a nightmare, and I remember just running from body to body, trying to help them and provide aid. And there was other people there, and we were trying to coordinate things, and we were trying to get people off the battlefield, and we were trying to retreat and take the few that were alive with us. I mean, most everyone was dead, and only some were alive, and some were so badly mutilated that we had to triage. And it was like war, I think. I've read a lot about war, never been to war. And another thing that I felt so strongly is I've always, this came into the mushroom experiences. I'll talk about another part of this, I call another chapter. But there's this experience of men in war that's a kind of love that men have, that they form when they're in war, that's unknown in any other experience in life. And I experienced it there. I wanted so badly to help them. And just at that point, I believe what was happening was I was beginning to come out of the experience, because the dosage was wearing off. Physical time had been going on, and it wasn't as strong. And I remember it was as if I was trying to reach out and carry someone off the battlefield, and I couldn't get to them. I was trying to get to them, and I couldn't. And then suddenly I felt like I was on, all I can describe it as, I was on the outside of an enormous rubber ball, and I wanted to get back inside the ball, and that's where this reality was, where my fellow soldiers needed my help. And I couldn't get through it, and I was crawling, and at one point I hit it with my forehead, and I was punching it with my fists and my elbow. And finally, one time when I punched it with my elbow as hard as I could, my elbow got through, and I pushed my hand down into it, and I got my arm through this membrane, this ball, it seemed like, and I was clawing around inside of it, and I was trying to pull myself back in. And I had a very strong awareness that I was being taken out of this reality, and I was so fucking angry, and I don't know what, I was raging at the mushrooms. And I was like, you motherfuckers, no, not now, let me back in there, my people are dying. It sounds crazy, but I was like, my people need me, they're bleeding and dying, and this motherfucking God that devastated us, man. And I just was so angry. I wanted to get back to him so desperately. And I could just feel it slipping and slipping. And then at another level of it, suddenly I realized I couldn't get through this rubber thing, and my hand just sort of snapped back. And I remember just sitting there kind of on my hands and knees, just pounding on it and crying and saying, you motherfuckers, let me back in there. And it was at that point that I kind of snapped back to awareness. And again, I'm laying in bed, and I'm staring out at the bushes, and they're accumulating snow. And now I can see that the snow maybe has doubled or tripled. So I know I've been out for some length of time. And I just laid there. I still didn't move. I guess I was still really tripping. It only been, when I realized how much time had gone by, it was only an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes. about an hour and 45 minutes. And that's when it was 10:30. So when I did a chart of this event, I set it at 10:30. Seemed like the right time. And actually it was about 10:45. So I felt like the heart of the experience was probably about 10:30. That's the time I went with. So I just laid there for a while. And I remember getting up finally. I could just, get out of the fetal position and sit up on the side of the bed. And I didn't want to try to walk yet, but I just remember sitting there and being so angry, and I was thinking to myself, I want to go right now into my stash and get more mushrooms and take however many is necessary so that I can get back to my people that need me. But I didn't have much. I only had like about another 4 grams. There were some in the coming, but they weren't ready. And I remember thinking about that, thinking, shit, I can't get back. All I could think of, I can't get back. I gotta get back. And just being so angry. And finally, when I was able to, I walked into the living room and sat down somewhere else, not where my wife was, in a different part of the house where I could just look out the window. And I remember smoking some pot, just trying to calm myself down. Smoking a lot of pot, and thinking about all of what had happened to me. And at some point, I don't know how much time went by. I think like basically I was still tripping, but it was just like maybe more of like a normal trip. So there's a lot of processing going on. And I got up and I went back to the bedroom, to my wife's side of the bed, where her .357 Magnum was, this gun that I fantasized that I could kill myself with. And I remember opening the drawer and taking this gun out and holding it in my hand and kind of turning it over in my hand. And I didn't want to kill myself anymore. I mean, it was just gone. So, and the gun just seemed so strange. It was like this different thing. It was just this, I'm not a gun guy. I'm not against guns. I believe it's a good made to have one for protection, but, I'm not going to rub my penis on it or give it a name. But it was just a gun. It was just a tool. And it didn't have all of this meaning that it had to me about suicide. And I put it back in the drawer. And I thought to myself too, there is a God. So maybe an hour and a half on 5 grams of magic mushrooms, the suicidal ideation was gone and it has never come back. That was in 2007. And I mean, guys, for decades of my life, whale shit at the bottom of the ocean, depression, dealing with in one large 5-gram dose of magic mushrooms, and it's gone, like for good. And I did some other dosages, and I will try, be talking about that. But really, this was the one that did it. If I did nothing else after that, everything from this one experience, I think I got everything that I needed, really. Anything else after that, it was nothing like that. And this one was the one that did the trick. And again, I sincerely thank Terence McKenna, because it was his book Food of the Gods that just really motivated me to do this. It was not an easy thing to do. It's highly illegal. I'm a straight guy, really. I've done drugs before, and but I'm not one typically to do something illegal, and pretty much a straight arrow. And here I am in my little suburban neighborhood and keeping this secret to myself, and not to mention the whole part about the ego death. I will tell you this, after that, it became really hard to take the 5 grams. I went into it sort of innocently the first time, not realizing that when they say ego death, they're talking about death. Emphasis on death, and it's scary as fuck, in my opinion. And so the next time I did 5 grams, it was with a healthy dose of respect and fear, really. It was like I had to kind of overcome the fear of it to do it, because I knew too that I had a good product by then. I taught myself how to grow a decent product and to preserve it in a way that didn't destroy the psilocybin. And so afterwards, when I did it, I knew it was going to work. And I'm not gonna lie, it was hard. Like sometimes I'd say, well, I'll do it this weekend, and I'll be like, I can't do it this weekend, so I'll do it the next weekend, and then finally I would do it. But it was not easy after that to ever again take that 5 grams, because, you know, and each time I did take the 5 grams, it came with the ego death, and experiences similar to this one, not as profound. There was one other experience that I really want to talk about. That was quite involved, where I did take another 6 grams, and had quite an amazing experience, a lot different. And that one I was actually trying to heal my wife at that time. But it went quite another way, maybe or maybe not. But yeah, so wow, I really want to talk about this for a long time, get it off my chest. It means a lot to me. All these experiences. I'm so grateful to be alive. And it's so wrong for people to have these opinions about these mushrooms that grow naturally out of the ground, that we as humans have been dealing with them for many, many eons of time. And the fact that they could help people, it's not just mushrooms. I think of ibogaine, and ibogaine, how much it can help soldiers that have PTSD. They have clinics here in Mexico. If you have the money, addictions, PTSD, goodbye with iboga. So, thank you guys.